rain pounded relentlessly against the pavement as I stood shivering in front of the Krispy Kreme store. It was well past midnight, and the store was eerily silent. Neon lights from nearby signs cast an eerie glow, reflecting off the wet ground. The craving for a donut had led me here, but now, as I stared at the darkened windows, a feeling of unease gnawed at the pit of my stomach. Pushing the heavy glass door open, a soft jingle announced my entrance. The store was dimly lit, the only source of light coming from the flickering fluorescent bulbs hanging overhead. I hesitated, glancing around at the deserted rows of empty booths and vacant tables. A chill ran down my spine, and my footsteps echoed through the hushed interior. "Hello," I called out, my voice barely louder than a whisper. No response. The scent of donuts lingered in the air, a sweet and comforting smell that seemed out of place in the unsettling atmosphere. As I approached the counter, a flicker of movement caught my eye. I turned my head, heart pounding, to see a lone employee standing behind the counter. His uniform was disheveled, and his eyes were tired, but there was something off about his gaze, distant, as if lost in thought. "Are you still open?" I asked, my voice quivering. The man's lips curved into a strained smile. Yes, of course. We're always open for donut lovers like you." I placed my order, trying to ignore the knot of unease that was tightening in my chest. The employee moved with a deliberate slowness, his movements almost mechanical, as if he was just going through the motions. As he handed me the paper bag with my order, his fingers brushed against mine.
I jumped slightly at the touch, but what really sent shivers down my spine was the cold, clammy feel of his skin.
I muttered my thanks and quickly retreated to one of the booths. Sitting down, I unwrapped the donut and took a hesitant bite. The taste was familiar, the perfect balance of sweetness and warmth that I had always associated with Krispy Kreme. But now, even the taste seemed tainted, as if the sweetness was masking something darker. I glanced around the store, my heart racing as my eyes played tricks on me. Shadows seemed to dance in the corners of the room, and the distant sound of dripping water echoed through the silence. The rain outside had turned into a drizzle, the drops tapping on the windows like ghostly fingers. I forced myself to look away, trying to distract my racing thoughts with my phone. But when I looked back up, my breath caught in my throat. The employee was standing right in front of my booth, his eyes fixed on me with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. "Is everything to your satisfaction?" he asked, his voice unnaturally soft. I nodded, my heart pounding. "Yes, it's great. Thank you." He lingered there for a moment longer, before slowly retreating back to the counter.
I tried to shake off the feeling of being watched, but every time I glanced in his direction, he was staring right at me.
Finishing my donut, I decided it was time to leave. I felt a mixture of relief and fear as I stood up from the booth. As I approached the door, I looked back one last time. The employee was still watching me, his gaze unbroken. I stepped out into the drizzling rain, the cool air providing a welcome contrast to the suffocating atmosphere inside. I told myself it was just my imagination, that the late hour and the eerie ambiance had gotten to me. But as I walked away from the Krispy Kreme store, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong, that there was more to the deserted store than met the eye. The next night, unable to resist my curiosity, I found myself back at the Krispy Kreme store. The rain had stopped, but the darkness still enveloped the store in an eerie embrace. The same employee stood behind the counter, His eyes locked onto me the moment I entered. This time, I didn't bother ordering anything. I just sat in a booth, watching him, and he watched me in return. Minutes stretched into hours, and the tension in the air grew thicker with each passing moment. It was as if we were trapped in a silent, unspoken standoff. Finally, unable to bear the unnerving gaze any longer, I stood up and approached the counter. "Can I help you with something?" I asked, my voice trembling. The employee's lips twitched into a faint smile. "You've been coming here often, haven't you?" I nodded, my heart pounding. I wanted to understand why this place feels so strange. He leaned in, his face inches from mine. "You're looking for answers, aren't you? But some doors are best left unopened." I stumbled back, my pulse racing. "What are you talking about?" He shook his head slowly. "You're not ready to know. Leave this place before it consumes you." I didn't need any more urging. I fled the store, my footsteps echoing in the empty street. But the employee's words lingered in my mind, a haunting reminder that something sinister lurked. Days turned into weeks, and the Krispy Kreme store became an obsession I couldn't shake. The unease grew, festering like a wound that refused to heal. I visited the store repeatedly, each time feeling the weight of the employee's gaze on me, each time experiencing the growing dread that something was drawing me in, deeper and deeper. One fateful night, I returned to the store, determined to confront whatever darkness had taken hold. As I pushed open the door, a blast of frigid air greeted me. The store was even darker than before, the dim lights casting elongated shadows that seemed to reach out like fingers. The employee was nowhere to be seen. But as I approached the counter, I froze. In the glass display, donuts were arranged in intricate patterns, symbols that seemed to twist and writhe, sending a shiver down my spine. The air grew heavy with a suffocating presence, and I felt like I was being watched by 1,000 unseen eyes. A whisper, barely audible, seemed to curl around me. I spun around, but there was no one there. Just the darkness, the eerie symbols, and the overpowering sensation that I was no longer alone. "Who's there?" I stammered, my voice trembling. The employee's voice seemed to come from all around me. "You wanted answers, and now you shall have them." As the words echoed in the air, the symbols on the display began to shift and change, forming a grotesque tableau of twisted shapes and figures. My heart raced. A scream caught in my throat as the symbols seemed to come to life, writhing and pulsating with an otherworldly energy. I stumbled back, my mind reeling, and that's when I saw a glimpse of a face, contorted and nightmarish, staring at me from the shadows. The employee's face, twisted and monstrous, seemed to be everywhere. I turned to run, but the exit had vanished. Panic clawed at me as I backed away, the symbols growing more frenzied, the whispering growing louder, filling my ears with a cacophony of unintelligible voices. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of malevolent energy, trapped in a nightmare that had become all too real. Just as I thought I couldn't bear it any longer, the symbols suddenly ceased their movement, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. I found myself standing alone in the empty Krispy Kreme store, the display back to its usual arrangement, the employee nowhere in sight. Terrified and shaken to my core, I fled the store, vowing never to return. But the memories of that night, The face of the employee, contorted in grotesque horror, haunted my every waking moment. I had sought answers, delving into the darkness that had taken hold of that Krispy Kreme store, and in doing so, I had become entangled in a nightmare from which there was no escape. The taste of donuts, once a comforting pleasure, was forever tainted by the sinister secrets I had uncovered. And as I walked away from that cursed place, I knew that some doors were best left unopened, some mysteries were better left unsolved, and that the true horror lay not in the donuts themselves, but in the darkness that dwelled within the human psyche, a darkness that could consume even the most innocent of cravings.